All right, well, here we are again, and we're in a change of venue. We're now in Dave's house. So welcome to Dave's house. I'm John Swaino, and this is Dave. You tell him who you are.
I'm Dave Tenney.
And we are two beards and a Bible. I tried to switch it up on him. Shouldn't do that. So we're glad that you're with us. And today we are going to pick up where we left off last time. And we are in Matthew 7, verses 7 through 12 is where we're going to begin. We'll be talking about prayer and the golden rule. So I will volunteer to go ahead and read those first verses. Matthew 7, starting at verse 7. And that is through verse 12. So Matthew 7 at verse 7 says, "Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds. And to him who knocks it will be opened. Or what man is there among you who, if his son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will he give him a serpent? If you then, being evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Therefore, whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets."
I think that's called the golden rule, isn't it?
I think so. Yep.
You know, or is it do unto others before they do unto you?
Yeah, I think that probably. Well, no. Yeah,
that's not what it is.
That's the mafia rule or something.
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah, but and I believe it, depending on your translation, but the King James, I think, makes it a little bit more flowery and is probably the one that we kind of remember in our minds the most.
So we have here, and he's talking about asking and seeking and knocking, and he talks about everyone who asks receives, and he who seeks finds, and to him who knocks it will be open. What is he talking about there, do you think?
Well, if we are seeking the Lord, if we're seeking His Word and His truth, we're going to find it.
Yeah,
it's been given to us, in the Scriptures, and even at that time, if someone was seeking and asking and knocking, if they were seeking the truth, Christ was going to tell them the truth.
Right.
And so it still stands for us today in the same way.
I've heard people try to apply this to prayer, and I don't think the context allows that. Okay, yeah. I don't believe it does. Mm-hmm. But I've heard people try to apply these things to prayer. And although, I guess there are some lessons about prayer, there's some concepts of prayer in here. Mm-hmm. But, I think
the asking, I suppose, would apply.
Yeah, he has this thing about what man, if his son asked for bread, would give him a stone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I might do that for fun. Or his son asked for a fish, and he will give him a serpent.
Right.
He says, if you then being evil, what?
Yeah, that's kind of harsh, isn't it?
It is. I don't feel that way.
But in the context of when you're really, and we'd have to open up the Greek dictionaries and so on, but it basically, in the context, it means that people that are not working according to the will of the Lord.
And I guess, in comparison to God, mm-hmm. No doubt. Right. No doubt.
Well, we're told in the Scriptures that you're either for me or you're against me. Yeah. And there is no, we tend to, and I think we spoke about this in a past episode, where in our legal system we tend to apply levels of good and bad to things. Yeah. If you just steal a candy bar, it's not as bad as if you stole a Cadillac. Right. And but in God's eyes, sin is sin. Yeah. And it separates us from Him.
And it's all the exact same.
It's either good or evil.
Exactly. So he uses these analogies to talk about being able to find out what God's will is. And pretty much a lot of these things that are in this chapter are talking about the will of God. Mm-hmm. But, because right after this, he talks about the narrow way, So he's talking about God's will, following what God would want us to do. But he has this thing, he sums it up with this thing which we commonly talk about, the golden rule. You have something.
Well, in Luke 6:31, it also says, and just as you want men to do to you, you also do to them likewise.
Yeah.
Kind of keeping in that same...
You see that note I have right there?
There you go.
I wrote it down too. It's funny. But yeah, so the golden rule that, that we would treat others the way we would want to be treated.
Right. And that just goes to common sense, really, even. It's just plain good manners.
Yeah.
To treat people well and expect that you would be treated well as...
The hard part of this is when somebody treats you bad.
Right.
You shouldn't treat them bad.
Right.
It doesn't mean that. If somebody... It means it's all on, Christianity is all about you and you following God's law.
Right.
And if you think about, when somebody treats you bad or does something wrong to you, I don't know about you, but my gut reaction is to do the same thing back to them.
Right.
And we're taught not to do that.
Right. And, the Lord told us, who owns vengeance.
It's his.
It's his.
He says, vengeance is mine.
And it's hard to put that into perspective sometimes when we've been wronged by somebody. I've told you recently about a situation where I lost some money because I bought something that was not actually there to be bought.
Yeah.
Online. And there's that feeling in the pit of my stomach that, I'd like to go and fix that situation myself. But that's just not, even though that might be the human feeling that we have, we can't act on those things.
No, we can't.
It's if you think back, not to derail you in your thought, but in Genesis, where you think of Cain and Abel, Cain killed his brother Abel, and the the Lord was upset. He didn't accept his offering.
Yeah,
and he told Cain, if you do well, you're
going to be approved of God. Yeah, you're going to be accepted.
And
he says, and if you don't, he goes, sin is how does he say? Sin is lurking at your door.
Right. So he didn't really chastise Cain for having that thought of being upset, but it's how you act upon that.
Absolutely.
If you act in a godly way, or if you allow those feelings of revenge to play out.
Yeah, the commands in the Bible are universally commands for you as an individual to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They're all the commands are directed at you. What other people do, you can't help.
Right.
And this idea that you're supposed to treat people the way you would want to be treated, it's something you do. You treat them that way.
Mm-hmm.
What they do, you can't control.
You won't have to, on the day of judgment, you won't have to answer for what they did.
Exactly. That's not your business.
Right.
You're going to answer for what you did.
As I've heard a sermon preached about, it's not your end of the stick. You go whittle at your end of the stick, and I'll whittle at mine.
This coffee is good. What kind is that again?
Pearl coffee, Seattle style.
Seattle style. It's very good.
It's a darker roast.
Makes me want to put some Pearl Jam on.
There you go. Maybe our next YouTube endeavor will be coffee.
Oh yeah,
coffee related.
Yeah. So what's our next section here? I'll read the next section.
The two ways and the false prophets, Matthew 7:13 through 23.
So we'll just stay here in Matthew. So it says, enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate, and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go by in it. Because narrow is the gate, and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it. So let's talk about those couple of verses there, just two verses. He's talking about, I guess the life of the follower of God, and how they would the walk that they would have, and he only talks about two ways. There's only two choices,
right?
And when we die someday, we're either going to go to heaven or we're going to go to hell. There's two choices. And that's really what the wide gate and the narrow gate is.
Right.
I mean, that's what he's talking about.
And one of the things that befuddles me sometimes is, no matter who it is, no matter how they've lived their lives, when someone passes away, and it's an unfortunate thing and it's a sad thing when anybody passes from this life in an unsaved condition, but to the world there seems to be many ways, because we see people that we can, not judging the person's eternal destination, but judging from what we understand of the scriptures and understanding, having watched the fruit from someone's life, and it doesn't seem to line up sometimes with what we see in the scriptures.
Yeah. How many funerals have you been to where somebody said, "Oh, so and so is a terrible person. They're probably going to hell."
Right. Very. I haven't been personally to any.
Yeah, me neither. but there's several people that have died like that way.
Right.
But usually, you'll go to some funeral and the preacher always preaches them into heaven. Oh, so and so is up there with mom and dad and blah blah blah. And that's not the case most of the time.
It's either godly or evil. And we see that between the narrow and the wide gate. We're told that many are going to come thinking that they're saved, and that's a sad thing.
It is.
That if you spend some time thinking about that, you lose sleep at night.
Yeah.
Because that reality that there are going to be people that thought they were working towards the will of the Father on this earth, but they never studied to show themselves approved.
Yep.
They took someone's word for it, and I don't know about you, but I would say don't take our word for it. As you're listening to this, follow along in the scriptures, see if what we're telling you is true. Study the scriptures, study the context of what is being said. Think about who's being spoken to, and what the situation is surrounding it.
If you think we're wrong about something, let us know.
Yeah,
because we may be.
Yeah,
I mean, we're open to that. That John and I don't know everything. Right. Don't let our wives know that, but I think they know. So let's continue on here. I'm going to read through verse 20. It says, he says, "Beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ravenous wolves. You will know them by their fruits. Do men gather grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Even so, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Therefore, by their fruits you will know them." Mm-hmm. Now, I love how Jesus always uses these agricultural examples.
Right. He knew his audience.
Yeah, he knew his audience. And what's funny is it's like they're universal examples. Mm-hmm. Because people back then were eating fruit and we're eating it today.
Right.
All of the same basics of life have never changed.
And that we understand that, a plant that isn't doing what we expect it to do, we would cut it down. Someone gave me some kind of a creeping vine lily type of a plant, real pretty. And when I brought it home and I put it in a pot and put it in our sunroom, and it promptly died. At least I think it's dead.
Yeah.
And so the person that gave it to me said, "Well, trim it back, and then see what happens in the spring." I'm pretty sure it's dead.
It's gone.
But I did what she said, and I trimmed it, and what did I do with the part that wasn't being fruitful? I threw it away.
Put it in the coal furnace.
Right. In fact, I did.
Yes.
But yes, that makes sense to us. Even if we're not living on a farm,
right?
We understand that.
So he talks about false prophets, and you could. I mean, there were false prophets back then. There's false prophets today. Mm-hmm. There's people out there proclaiming some gospel that is completely foreign to what the words of the Bible.
Right.
And when those people are trying to reel you into that religion, mm-hmm. They come to you in sheep's clothing. They come to you like harmless, they act like they want the best for you. But it says inwardly they are ravenous wolves.
Yeah. I actually had, maybe I mentioned this last week, it's been a couple of weeks going here, that I had an opportunity to speak to somebody from a religious group that they believe that Jesus Christ came back the second time in 1948.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, the hackles on the back of my neck go up. You know, something's not right here.
Yeah.
and you know them by their fruits. You know, you can look into the scriptures and you can understand that this person in 1948 was not Christ because these other things didn't happen. Because we're told in the scriptures that when he comes back, you know, it's going to be for the judgment. And so, again, in studying to show ourselves approved.
Nowhere in the Bible have I ever found a place where it says that Jesus will ever step on this earth again. Ever.
Right.
I've never found that.
Right.
Now, if I'm wrong about that, you let me know.
Right.
But I've studied the Bible pretty heavily over the last 10 years, and I've never seen that.
And sadly, when people say these things and they purport these lies, the lies of Satan, that's all we can say that they are. I mean, and when they say these things, people believe them.
They do.
And it's because they are wolves in sheep's clothing. You know, they catch people in a vulnerable time of their life, possibly, and they're searching for something, some truth, and then they are there with this bit of comfort.
Yeah.
And sadly, I guess that speaks to those of us in the Lord's church, how we should get out there and be there for people when they're searching.
Yeah, and when John and I refer to the Lord's church, we're talking about the church that's written about in the Bible. That's what we're talking about.
Right.
You know, Jesus said that he would build my church. That's the only church that's ever mentioned in the Bible. So when John and I use that term, that's all we're talking about.
Right.
It's the church that Jesus started in the Bible.
And it's not us. It's not Dave and I condemning maybe the religious group that maybe you're affiliated with.
Yeah.
It's us stating what the scriptures say. So in all of these things, we don't want to purport our opinion.
No.
You know, we talk about, you know, our feelings on some of the scriptures and you know, the thoughts that come to our minds when we read those scriptures, but we want to come across with the truth as it is in the scriptures, and anything more, anything less is from the devil.
Right, absolutely. There are no denominations in the scriptures.
Mm-hmm.
There's only the church that Jesus came here and established. It's the only one. So that's what we're referred to. So he talks there about these false prophets, that you would know them by their fruits. Now I've got about over 50 fruit trees in my yard out here. And right now it's hard to tell a pear from an apple tree from a plum tree. But in August you'll be able to tell what's what.
Yeah. And in time, even when the leaves come out, you'll be able to tell the differences.
And the same way with a lot of times with, not a lot of times, all the time, with people who are teaching false things, eventually you see what kind of fruit they're bearing.
And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but in nature, don't we have some plants that mimic actual fruits?
Oh, yeah.
But are in truth actually poisonous.
Yes.
And so, you know, if you are taken in by that fruit, and then you take a bite of it, you'll find out that wasn't what you thought it was.
Yeah, there's even in, like, I work with this guy who he picks mushrooms, or he's like big into this mushroom hunting stuff. And one of the easy mushrooms identifies a morel. But there's another kind of mushroom called a false morel that looks really similar, except it'll kill you. Mm-hmm. You know, and I think there's lots of examples in nature of this idea.
So we have to be sure.
Yeah. We got about 10 minutes left here, John. I will go ahead and read. I was supposed to read till what, 27?
23.
23. I got one more section. I want to read 21 to 23.
All right.
He says, "Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' shall enter the kingdom of heaven." He says, "but he who does the will of my Father in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, 'Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in your name, cast out demons in your name, and done many wonders in your name? And I will declare to them, I never knew you. Depart from me, you who practice lawlessness.'" All right, so that's some pretty harsh words there.
Right.
So, Jesus is making a point that even those who would profess to be followers of him, not every one of those is going to get into heaven.
Right.
And he just finished up talking about false prophets and their fruits. And now he talks about who's going to enter heaven.
Right.
Who's the person that's going to enter heaven?
The one who does the will of the Father.
Exactly. And that's in the doing.
Right.
Is where it's at.
It's in the action.
Yeah.
Because of what you understand and know. Yeah. And that's the thing, is that when I speak to people from other religious groups, in fact the one told me last week, that well you're wrong, because you're supposed to do things this way. You're supposed to keep all the Old Testament feasts and all these things. And so they truly believe that they are in the right as well. And the only way to tell whether or not whether I'm in the right or they're in the right, is to appeal to the Scriptures. Yeah. And to take an honest look at the Scriptures, because men can be deceived.
How did you appeal to that?
I studied the Scriptures. I looked into in Hebrews. We were talking about it in this particular group. The one thing that we tackled first was the Old Testament feasts, and then in Hebrews 8 and following, actually Hebrews 6, I believe, and following, it speaks to how those old things were done away with, that they were a shadow of things to come. If there had been no fault with the first covenant, then there wouldn't have been any reason for the second. And then there by reason needing to be the death of the testator before the New Testament comes into effect. And Christ died on the cross, ushered in the New Testament, and the Lord's church was established on the day of Pentecost in Acts 2. Yeah. And we can follow those things through, and we can understand that is what the Lord's church looks like. And then the thing that comes to my mind is when Christ was on the cross, and before he took his last breath, he said, "It is finished." And that further speaks to he's not coming back. He's not coming back for sin. He's not coming back to take care of sin again. He's already done that.
He finished it on the cross.
Right. The ultimate sacrifice has been done. And then a good friend of mine, another preacher, helped me remember and pointed out to me that in Colossians 2, between verses 13 and 18, I think it's verse 16, says that we shall let no man judge you according to festivals and feasts and new moons, and basically saying, don't let any men judge you over the keeping a Passover. It's one of those Old Testament feasts, and that speaks directly to what this group was saying. So by an honest look at through the Scriptures, we understand that was a falsehood that was being taught.
They weren't producing good fruit.
Right, and it may take some time. You might have to do some digging. We need to look into the Scriptures diligently, and so we might not be able to just open the book and say, "Oh yeah, there's the answer." Yeah, but, we need to do like we're doing and go through the Scriptures and get a picture of it, right, in its context.
One thing that's interesting in this verse, he talks about doing the will, and that idea of action on your part as a Christian is a theme that is woven throughout the Scriptures. Being a Christian is more than just saying, "Oh, I believe in Jesus." Right. If that's the extent of your Christianity, you need to reevaluate what you're doing here.
Even the demons believe and tremble.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I've heard it said that belief is more than just mental assent.
It is.
If belief doesn't, and I've said it before, if it doesn't cause you to do some action, then it's empty.
James say that faith without works is dead.
It is. Yes.
And if you believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of the living God, then you by nature you also believe the things that he said.
Right. Which is going to make you do.
Right. And if you believe those things, there's going to be some action involved. If I believe that the brakes on my car are broken, I'm going to fix them.
Yes.
I'm going to take action and that I'm not going to drive it
Yeah.
until I understand that it's been fixed.
Yeah. Yep. That's a good example. Well, where are we at, John? We're probably about time to wrap it up here.
All
We're
right.
about 25 minutes.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining in with us again. We got through a few points, and if you have any questions, and by all means, leave them in the comments. As Dave mentioned earlier, if you have any reason to reach out to us, if you'd like to look further into the scriptures, if you've decided that you'd like to put Christ on in baptism, then by all means, we'd love to study with you about that. We'd love to be helpful wherever we can.
Or if you just want to argue, we can do that too.
There you go. But the one I guess stipulation that we put in there is that if we're going to have an exchange, the one thing that we both need to agree on is that we let God be true and every man a liar.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
So that's where we can have a fruitful discussion and a fruitful argument that way.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Well, thank you very much. We'll see you next week.
All right. Cut.